That would mean we need 40,000 doses of vaccine to give all those men 2 doses if we perfectly targeted this. We only have 23% of that target amount of vaccine. So we do not have enough vaccine to reach everyone that we need.
Well, that's Dr. Matthew Golden, an epidemiologist from the University of Washington, and he's talking about vaccinations, not for COVID, but for monkeypox. We've seen a sharp increase in cases in King County. So what are the concerns around this new epidemic? Plus, what's the political scene looking like now that the smoke's clearing from last week's primary? And are you ready to be part of a new city council district? Hope so, because some of those borders are indeed changing. Well, that's what's happening this week. All that and more on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel, and the views expressed here are my own. I am joined by David Croman of the Seattle Times, transportation reporter there, who's been doing some other work too. And David, I saw that you had this piece with your colleague, Mike Lindblom. He wrote about this new passenger-only ferry in Des Moines, and I was trying to figure this one out. Are more people going to ride this because it's a 40-minute trip to downtown Seattle, or because it has the coolest name in the fleet, the Chill Cat?
Yeah.
What do you think about this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I am a passenger-only ferry rider from Kingston, which is very useful for me. But I live on the other side of the water. This is just, whether or not it is actually more efficient to do than than driving on I-5, and
right.
That's unclear. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see if it takes off. Well, always great to see you, David. Thank you, as always. Thanks to our listeners, too. Thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. They're right on the first floor of City Hall. Thanks also to our patrons. Can't thank you enough. A big thanks again to intern Rob, longtime supporter of the show, offered some significant support last month. He's supporting the show above the $10 level, so he gets his very own Seattle News, Views, and Brews coffee mug. And he's one of our most creative mugshot takers, too. We feature one every week. Rob sent in this one of his mug, checking out the Mariners-Yankees series. I'm not sure what's in that mug, but the series did start pretty rough for the M's this week, so please consume responsibly there, Rob. If you listen, please do become a patron. That's the Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. And finally, thanks to Converge Media. The video of the podcast airs on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, let's get her going with right here, right now. Well, another day, another epidemic. And this week, the Seattle City Council, learning more about monkeypox, had a briefing earlier this week. It's now a national health emergency. We're seeing cases in Washington state just about double every week. Most of the cases are centered in King County and Seattle, and most of the cases involve men having sex with men. And David, I want to make sure that we're clear on this. Dr. Golden said this to the council, and we heard him a little bit of what he said off the top of the show. This is not COVID 2.0. This is not HIV, but it does, to me, feel like another test of our public health system as our state tries to get the right amount of vaccine, tries to get a handle on this outbreak. It hasn't been easy so far, from what I'm hearing from health officials.
No, and you're right. I mean, this is not nearly the seriousness, but like you said, it's sort of a test, and it's the first time I guess we've had the opportunity since COVID, because when COVID came along, it was widely reported and acknowledged that the public health system was not up to the task. In Washington, it's a collection of public health systems that all have a lot of independence, and that maybe has some advantages. But when you're trying to create a coordinated response, it has a lot of disadvantages, especially when some are more funded than others. And so, I guess the question was, all right, have we learned anything from COVID?
Right. That's kind of where I was going with it. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so far, I mean, we're hearing the same issues of there is a vaccine, but the rollout is slow and communication is mixed. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a little disheartening, mostly if and when another pandemic comes along that is a more serious one. You'd want to think that we would get the slightly slower moving, less serious one under control more easily than this.
Right. I was thinking about that too. And just to dovetail to what you're saying here, very frustrating with this. And we heard this from Dr. Golden during the council briefing here. So state health officials had a large supply of monkeypox vaccine, but a lot of it expired and they didn't replenish their supply as quickly. As I understand it, now that we have a national emergency declared here, there should be some more resources getting freed up. But I don't know, after 2 years of COVID, you'd think we'd be better prepared? Or how do you look at this and just managing outbreaks from the local perspective and the national perspective for that matter? Because there's cases all over the U.S. now.
Yeah, it's the thing with public health is maybe you don't need it until you really do.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And if you're not kind of tending to that system, even in the quiet times, some of the results can be bad when you really need it. And I think, but again, we have really needed it lately, and yet still, it's been a little hard to wrap our arms around this monkeypox thing, and that's a little concerning.
Yeah, definitely so. Well, thank you for talking about that with me. I wanted to move on to something else here, David, because you were back in the saddle for primary election coverage last week. I was trying to figure out some of your big takeaways from election night. I know you were focusing on state legislature. It didn't appear to me that the majorities in place were getting shaken up too much, or what did you discover?
Yeah, I'm sort of doing this as a pinch hit. I'm not a political reporter at the Seattle Times now, but got to step in. But
you play one on TV. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what stood out to me is how kind of it looked incredibly similar to past elections, and in fact was maybe even in some races you could argue was slightly a slight improvement for Democrats, which even if there was no change from past elections, that's notable because the Republican Party in Washington State, in both the House and the Senate, has been pretty vocal that they really want to go after at least one of the majorities in the legislature, and maybe both. At a time when everyone's predicting a red wave. And what I saw here is basically an affirmation of what already exists there. Maybe again, my read on this isn't super comprehensive, and maybe I'm missing something, but I didn't see any Democratic incumbent that looked to me to be legitimately at risk of losing their seat in some of the hot races. To me, Emily Randall in Bremerton was seen as kind of that's like the most expensive race, and it seemed like she was kind of maybe the most likely to lose her seat. And in fact, she got 53% of the vote in the primary, which if you're getting over 50% in a primary as an incumbent, that's pretty good news.
Very good sign.
And is actually an improvement from when she won her seat before with 51%. So, I think obviously it's a primary; things can change. We don't want to make any big sweeping pronouncements, but if I'm a Washington State Republican, I would be fairly disappointed with these results. Yeah,
a lot of investments made in a number of different races. And I'm going to be really interested in another race here, David. Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, Democrat, in a position historically occupied by a Republican in our state, got about 40% of the vote, far more than any of his challengers. But I'm interested in this one because the candidate he's up against will be Julie Anderson, it looks like, the Pierce County auditor, who actually made a point to run as a nonpartisan candidate. And she's pulling it off so far, which maybe that's another comment against Republicans here, too. But I'm trying to figure out if this approach will help her, hurt her for the general election. It's very interesting when you have a nonpartisan candidate entering a race.
It is. And I mean, if there's any race where you can maybe pull that off, it's probably Secretary of State. Washington has a history. We haven't. Jansley, we've had a Democratic governor since the 80s, and yet Kim Wyden, a Republican, had managed to continually win her race. I think that there is a certain sense of, in these crazy polarized times, there were enough Democrats who liked the idea of a highly moderate centrist Republican holding that office as sort of a sign of balance and kind of
bipartisanship,
lingering faith in the two-party system. I think Julie Anderson is sort of trying to take advantage of that. It should be said that Steve Hobbs is sort of the Kim Wyman of the Democratic Party. He's about as moderate as you can get among Washington Democrats. So it's not like if he wins, it's going to be some major lurch to the left in the Secretary of State's office. But in title, Julie Anderson is clearly sort of trying to seize that appetite that obviously exists in Washington State for some apolitical people in that role.
Yeah, all over her website. And I'm interested to see how that plays out, who ends up funding that race, because I don't know what the Republicans are going to do at this point. But I did want to talk about also some of the different congressional races out there. Kim Schreier in that 8th congressional district, the Democrat incumbent, headed to the general election, and it won't be against Reagan Dunn. I was surprised by this. More of a household name in King County, but rather Republican Matt Larkin, the former Pierce County deputy prosecutor and candidate for state attorney general in 2020. Did that surprise you? I thought that Schreier was vulnerable in this race, and I know 40% isn't great, but I guess we'll see what happens in that one.
Yeah, I think she's in like upper 40s at this point. Yeah. So it's,
Mm-hmm.
You don't, as an incumbent, you want to be over that 50 to feel truly comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, she's not guaranteed to win that race, but
no.
That district as it's drawn is, pretty moderate centrist. I mean, it's Kim Schreier even has run some ads talking about standing up to Joe Biden as sort of an acknowledgement of that, I think. And it was Republican. Yeah, obviously the borders of it have changed, but it was Republican for years. But with Dave Reichert, he was pretty kind of moderate Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what this primary though shows is the kind of some of the challenges in a Republican Party that's split between the kind of MAGA wing and the more traditional wing, which.
Yeah.
And then I do think that in this district, at least, that probably does make it harder for Republicans because they're not going to, I don't imagine a ton of ex-Kim Schreier voters peeling off to vote for Matt Larkin.
Right.
Whereas maybe you can imagine some people who flipped to Kim Schreier from Dave Reichert kind of flipping back to Reagan Dunn. It's harder to see that with a type like Matt Larkin. So
interesting. Okay.
Surprising in that that is a moderate district, and Matt Larkin is, kind of more right wing than say
tough
Reagan
on crime, mm-hmm.
But also not that surprising in that this is the nature of primaries these days, which is oftentimes rewards the more kind of pronounced competitor, even in Washington's top two primary system.
Right. And top two, you bring it up there. I'm very interested to see how ranked choice voting in the future impacts all this. One last piece. I just thought it was interesting watching what's happening in the Southwest Washington area. Jamie Herrera Butler and Joe Kent apparently overtaking her in that race for the 3rd district. Some thoughts about this one, because it looked like that red wave was not hitting, but maybe it is in Southwest Washington. That one could be a recount. I should preface by saying that, but interesting to see that back and forth there too.
Could be a recount, but at this point, it seems pretty clear that Joe Kent is the favorite to win that race.
Has the momentum. Mm-hmm.
I've seen some national figures actually call it for him.
Yeah.
I mean, there was. I think going into a lot of these primaries nationwide, there was an expectation that the Republicans who had voted to impeach Donald Trump would lose. But that was the one exception being Washington State, where we have a top two primary. It's not split by Republican primary and Democrat primary. And that created a scenario, and it worked out for Dan Newhouse, in which it's one of the two people is almost guaranteed to be a Democrat, despite the fact that the Democrats almost is very likely not going to be competitive in the general election.
Right. Okay.
But because of that, kind of saves Dan Newhouse's bacon a little bit. Jamie Herrera Butler was very close to pulling that off in Southwest Washington, but I mean, I guess it's probably not going to work out for her. It seems like.
Yeah. Well, still a lot ahead. We're going to be talking about elections over the next several months here, folks. So always thank you for tuning in. All right, coming up, quick check here. What city council district are you in? Think about it long and hard. And also think that, guess what? That might be changing relatively soon here. So we're going to talk about those changing lines coming up on Now Hear This. Well, your city council district could very well be changing. According to the Redistricting Commission, working on this issue right now, the commission came up with a draft map last week and is looking for more public input on it before the lines are set this November. So this is all happening because the city is required to keep a relatively even number of people between its 7 districts. 2020 census figures showed growth in Seattle has been very uneven, so some work that needed to be done here. I talked with the chair of this nonpartisan commission, E.J. Juarez, a few months ago about this process, and there's a lot more riding on this than you might think.
We are charged with putting together a plan for the next 10 years. Because this has never been done before, we are learning on the fly. We're figuring out what the best practices are and trying to set up a process that can be replicated time after time.
David, before we get into where the lines are going to be drawn, just a quick thought about this process. This really is the first time Seattle is doing this redistricting process after voters approved the district system in 2013. So the commission wants to get this right. We keep hearing that. And with 7 council district seats up for election next year, I think a lot more people are watching on this. What do you think about this process?
It's interesting. It's sort of a small version of the what we see on a national level.
Yeah,
I think the stakes are probably a little bit lower because not quite talking about party control here, and I do think all the parties involved. There's not. It seems like the people trying to redraw these maps are doing so in good faith. There's not a lot. I'm not getting the sense that there's a lot of attempts at gerrymandering, and in fact, Seattle's charter kind of expressly forbids that. Says the maps have to make some semblance of kind of logical sense.
Right.
It's interesting. I think it clearly, you can see in the maps how the city is changing. You see Council District 7 shrinking geographically, but that's, only because it's growing in density
in the core by so much. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, meanwhile, I have to kind of refer back to these maps to remind myself.
Oh, yeah.
You see District 6, which has a lot of single-family homes and is not growing nearly the same pace as the rest of the city, actually expanding geographically. And so, it's this interesting kind of little, you get the snapshot of how the city is growing and where, and, where is new housing going and where are the population numbers. It's fascinating. And to me, the kind of most interesting thing is, in some ways, the splitting of Magnolia.
I was going to say that's a big one for me. And just to jump in on this a little more quickly, because you split Magnolia, it feels like it takes away some of that homeowner vote of Magnolia from D7, makes D7 this more kind of renter-centric, younger district. Are you seeing that too?
Yeah, you have to imagine it would make District 7 a little more young and progressive would be my guess. You never know. A lot of the
downtown businesses are there too in D7.
Yeah, exactly. And, luxury condo owners.
Oh, you bet. Yeah.
So, it's hard to say exactly, but I think one complaint of renters in particular and young people is the kind of political power of older, wealthier, whiter homeowners. And by splitting Magnolia, you could see a scenario when they can't unite quite as well around a single candidate. For me as a transportation reporter, and I think this is probably something that I will look into at some point, there's an interesting question about what that means for, say, the Magnolia Bridge, and whether there's kind of the same political pressure on whoever those council people are to do something about that. I think that we're hearing a lot of like groups representing communities of color, things like that, speaking pretty approvingly of these maps because it unites a lot of those communities, particularly the Chinatown International District, under one district, and that's right. I think for those communities is a big win. It seems to be doing so at the expense of the folks in Magnolia.
Right, and the other piece too, I thought this was really interesting, David. District 1 around West Seattle would grow, kind of picking up Soto, Georgetown, and even Pioneer Square there. A pretty big change for, I would say, a more residential district. I live in District 1, taking in more of that industrial, big business concern from D2. What do you make of that move? And they're also inheriting, I guess, some big transportation issues, as you've reported there in Soto. Some thoughts about that expansion of D1. That's another piece of this.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. I think you would have to guess that either D2 would go west or D1 would go east.
That's right.
Part of this was an attempt at putting South Park and Georgetown in the same district, two neighborhoods that share a lot of traits, sort of historically industrial, still by Seattle standards, sort of affordable, a lot of the same issues around pollution and, environmental justice and, lack of grocery stores and things like that. Yeah. And then also at the same time, before District 1 had Harbor Island and a large part of the port, Nucor Steel,
Yep.
where just while District 2 had the industrial district in Soto. And so this puts both of those, which of course interact with each other every day pretty
All the time.
closely,
Yeah.
in the same district. So again, you can kind of see the logic behind that move, while also sort of consolidating in District 2 a lot of the kind of major communities of color in the city, as we talked about Chinatown International District, a lot of the kind of East African communities of District 2. They all will now share a district, and so I mean, you can kind of see where they're going with that.
And a lot more input on this, folks, through November. Make sure you talk to the council member of your choice. They will direct you to the redistricting commission because there's a lot more input that still needs to happen here. Just to catch people up here and keeping you up to date, the council this week will get a police hiring update as they look at Mayor Harrell's officer retention and recruitment proposal. We will keep you updated on that. But David, I wanted to take a look at a new and different story coming out of the Economic Development Committee establishing a Seattle Film Commission. So Councilmember Sarah Nelson's been talking about this for a few months. Now she has some legislation to consider in the committee form right now. So the idea is, as I see it, it's a bummer to see all these movies come out with Seattle scenes in them, but they're shot up in Vancouver, right? So I guess I'm trying to figure out this next piece here. How do you think creating a film commission, which will be housed in the Office of Economic Development, as I'm seeing it here, how will that change the game for Seattle? Some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know enough about the film industry to know for sure. I do know, I'm fairly sure that in Portland, for example, and Vancouver, there's a lot of incentives and tax breaks and things like that to film in those places, which is why we see Seattle-based movies often filmed in those cities. I think to a certain extent, the state probably has to step in and do kind of more here if we want more movies filmed in Washington State. And it seems to be one of these perennial issues that comes up. I don't really know exactly how much progress they've made, but I remember, I think for a couple of years now, they've had these like zombie demonstrations down in Olympia.
Yes,
where people dress as zombies and sort of act like they're in a zombie movie as like a statement of wanting to make a friendlier climate for film.
Right. And thank you. Updating people on zombie news is very important, David. And I wanted to point out that this is something that happened over the past couple months because the legislature increased the state's annual business and occupation tax credit limit for the motion picture competitiveness program. So it was sitting at about $3.5 million. Now it's up at $15 million. And I think that could be one of those difference makers. And I was doing a little more research on this too. I didn't even realize it, but King County has been making some investments here as well. There's actually a pretty cool setup on Harbor Island where they have a couple of Harbor Island Studios is what it's called, has 2 sound stages there that are ready to create film. So I guess what this tells me, and I've looked at some of these different stats here, it's kind of this industry you don't hear about, but is definitely there because our creative economy, as it's sometimes called, the city says, okay, you can house about 60 different occupations and maybe 250,000 jobs. Let's galvanize this. Let's get some state, some county support here and try to put something together. I think it's very interesting. And again, an industry you really don't hear a lot about in our area.
Right. Yeah. The only recent time I've sort of seen a movie actually filmed in Seattle was there's one with Zoe Kravitz, that Steven Soderbergh movie.
Yeah.
Kravitz, Seattle. I thought it was terrible. It's a really bad movie. But it was nice to see some actual Seattle shots in the city.
Right.
And I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah. All right. Better movies. All right. David's got a list. You need some better movies, but we got to make sure we shoot them here. Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see. So Councilmember Nelson talking about this, wants to try to make sure that she has something in front of the council in September with the hope of voting it out of council and establishing this film commission by September 20th. So we'll see what happens there. All right. Well, up next, the state ferry boat crash on the Fauntleroy line. There's a lot more fallout there still to discover, and a situation with our state ferries that's not really looking that great in the long run. David's got some of the story on Transportation Talk. David, you worked with your colleague Mike Lindblom on the story about the captain of that ferry that crashed a week and a half ago on the Fauntleroy dock. He resigned last week, still picking apart some of the mystery there. But I thought it was interesting because you were talking about a larger problem. Taking a boat out of the mix, that does not help a strained ferry system. A captain resigning, that's a big challenge too. Can you try to give me that overall picture? I thought you were starting down this path in your story there. What's happening with our ferry system right now? Yeah,
so usually at full strength they'd have 21 boats in the fleet. 2 of those are out for maintenance and repairs all the time as sort of a planned, they want to keep up on it, which means basically full strength is 19 boats operating at any given time.
Okay.
Right. With the 2 that they always hold out for maintenance repairs, and now the Cathelmet and the Tacoma both being out for kind of more serious repairs, they're really down to 17 boats. Some of those are in really bad shape, or at least very old and have a lot of mechanical issues themselves. The only sort of dark silver lining of that is that the staffing shortages are worse than the vessel shortages.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Meaning that even if they had 19 boats, they would not be able to run them right now because they don't have enough staff.
It's just they need to get trained up and stuff. You wrote a little bit about that. It takes a while to become a captain of a state ferry boat.
Yeah. I mean, we're not talking. Basically everybody. This isn't just like picking up a mop and cleaning the bathrooms.
Yeah.
Some of this is like deckhands and engineers in the engineer room. I mean, it's pretty skilled labor and need a lot of training to do it well. And so it's not like they can just snag people off the street to do this. They are feeling confident that they have people in the pipeline, but they have not hit that
right.
yet. Certainly a ferry crashing into a dock is not a good thing, and a captain leaving is also not a good thing. It is only in the same way that, say, the West Seattle Bridge closing was tempered by the fact that there was a pandemic, so no one was going.
Right.
This could be worse if this was at a time when the ferry was at full capacity. It is not, and so they can sort of work within the confines that they have. Although, that's kind of cold comfort because that means that the system is hobbled enough that they can work around losing an entire boat.
Right. And it looks like there's at least some state money there to try to encourage more people to apply for jobs and build up their staff, I guess.
Yeah, and they're doing some partnerships with schools and recruiting and things like that. But it's sort of similar to police department or whatever. It just takes time, and everyone is competing for these jobs. So
any job market out there right now. That's a serious thing. Well, thanks. I'm sure we'll keep following up on that story there. But just to wrap up here, David, I had to reflect on one of the greatest joys of the Twitterverse over the last couple of weeks here. I did this, and you did this too. I learned about the raid of Mar-a-Lago because I follow Ice-T, and when he wrote "shirts popping off," that's kind of all you needed to know. I thought it was a moment there that was amazing to see.
Yeah, a long way from the days of Dan Rather or whatever delivering you the news. You happen to check Twitter, and the first tweet that comes across is Ice-T telling you about a raid on the former president by the FBI. Yeah,
who knew? I mean, how can we as a society thank Ice-T properly for the amount of news and information that he's given us? Well, who knows? That's always a fun time to talk with you, David. I very much appreciate it. Thanks to you. Thanks to everybody listening out there at Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. This podcast available on all the major platforms. And once again, if you are a listener, please support the show on Patreon. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching on Converge Media 2. See you next time.
Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2022.